I'm grateful for having the Coast Guard here. Reading you like the act clearly. You might.
Welcome to Sea Views. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Captain Andrew Parker, and I have Adam here as well, my co-host. And Andrew, I know you have quite a lot of maritime hats, but would you like to introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit about your role in maritime safety?
Yes, of course, Julie. I'm very pleased to be here today. My background really at sea was in the ferry industry. Latterly, I was in command for 20 years on North Sea ferries, both ro-ro and ro-packs ships, which, gave me a good background in bridge management and bridge resource management particularly, and navigational skills, collision regulations, etc., because we operated across the North Sea between Harwich and Rotterdam, which is, a very busy area.
Yes, you can say that again.
2019, for medical reasons, I had to leave the sea temporarily and decided, what am I going to do now? Wasn't a planned exit from a seagoing career, but I decided to try and set myself up as a consultant in maritime safety and specializing in the areas of bridge operations and safety management. I've managed to make a living out of that since, and actually went back to sea in 2022 for a few months, about 8 months altogether, when my previous employer asked me to go out to China and deliver 2 new builds they had built out there, 2 240-meter ro-pack ships. And they asked me if I would kindly go out to China and bring them back to Europe for them. So it was an offer I couldn't refuse, having left the sea a bit sort of sudden and unexpectedly. So that was a very nice way really to round off my seagoing career. But it also kept me up to date with what's going on at sea at the moment. So
Yeah. You've got a lot of experience then of working on the bridge and also helping other people who have that job as well.
Yes.
Which I think is going to be very interesting to get your perspective on. Could we talk about the bridge environment and how safety plays into that? Because you've seen it from both sides, really, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And I think in the ferry industry, we're quite fortunate that we have a regular crew. So, I was working with people that I knew very well, and many of them I'd known for many years. So my bridge team was very well practiced in working together. Of course, we also had pilotage exemption certificates. So we didn't take pilots going in and out of Rotterdam or in and out of Harwich. So everything was done by the bridge team. So that was the navigational crossing and the in and out of port as well, berthing and unberthing. Everything was done by our team. I think when we look at bridge resource management, that's the key really. And obviously we had training in that ashore fixed simulator training. Not often as a team though, normally as individuals, which is one of the areas I think we could improve on when we're doing bridge resource management training.
Yeah, so that kind of element of not just it being about you knowing what you're doing, but I suppose that training element of knowing how you do it as a team.
Exactly that, how we interact as a team. The way that you operate a bridge, the master is no longer God, and we are a team, and we try to get away from the rank-based organization of a bridge and move towards role-based. This is really to sort of level out the authority gradient. And the authority gradient was something when I first went to sea that was huge. Captain was, to me, when I was a junior officer, the captain was somebody I did not question. And fortunately, that sort of culture has changed with training. We now operate as a role-based organization on the bridge. So we have a navigator. Now, the navigator may be the captain. Doesn't have to be the captain. Could be the chief officer. Could be the officer of the watch. But the navigator is in control of the bridge and making the decisions with the help of the team that's surrounding him or her. So we have a navigator, we have a co-navigator normally, possibly somebody on the helm if it's in confined waters, and a lookout usually. So a full bridge team going into port would be 4 people. And the way those 4 people interact is really important to a safe passage.
It is a commercial operation. I mean, how important is the safety aspect on the bridge? How much of it is it really part of your day-to-day, everything you do?
Everything you do concerned with bridge operations is concerned with safety. It's the number one priority. We used to have a saying, safety of life, number one, safety of property, and safety of the environment are the three things that we are focused on the whole time. Now, that doesn't matter whether you're on a freight ferry or a passenger ferry, although obviously on a passenger ferry where you're carrying up to 1,200 passengers, you're much more high profile if things go wrong. But also, obviously, the risks and the consequences of incidents are much higher with a passenger vessel than maybe a cargo vessel. So all those things are on your mind the whole time, to be honest. And that's when you're making decisions on the bridge. You have to make those decisions with those three factors in mind. Is this safe for people, safe for property, safe for the environment in every decision you make? And sometimes you have to make difficult decisions like delaying a sailing or delaying an arrival because of weather, which upsets people. But, those decisions have to be made.
I wonder if that's a neat way to move on to the human factor in safety, because the latest sort of figures that I've actually read on this, 80% of incidents have a human factor. Am I anywhere near?
No, that's right, about 84%. And actually, I'm glad you've come onto this topic because I was just about to ask Andrew. I'm imagining the busy periods for the people on the bridge isn't necessarily crossing, although we all know that particular route you were applying, it crosses one of the busiest sea areas in the world. I'm imagining from a team point of view as well, when you're in port and you're discharging and loading, the risks of all the pressures from time, weather, trying to meet a timetable. You've just had a busy crossing, so fatigue, distraction of all the things that are going on. It must be a really busy time. And I'd love you to unpack that and just talk about that for a little bit.
And that's a big area. Obviously, entering port, leaving port, the bridge team has to be totally focused on the task. And, we were operating in areas of high density of shipping, strong tides and currents, and quite often strong winds. That, for the bridge team particularly, is the most high-risk time. And you have to be focused. You talked about time in port, loading and discharging. And of course, you could talk again, that's another topic would be on ro-ro vessels, particularly is vehicle deck safety, is where you are turning around a ship with 4,500 lane meters of freight and cargo and cars and passengers. And you've got to turn the whole thing around in 4 hours, the whole cargo off, whole cargo on. They're all whizzing around on the vehicle decks. You have people on the vehicle decks, not a good mix. And the two prime areas of concern for me for safety were on the vehicle decks, where unfortunately there have been many serious incidents over the years in various companies, and also mooring deck operations, where again there have been some serious incidents over the years involving life-changing injuries to people as well as fatalities. So those are high focus areas for safety.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We had a report in Chirp not so long back about one of the factors was the interface of ship and shore personnel. And then into the mix, you had sort of members of the public, lorry driver in this case, watched one person give a thumbs up to another person. And actually it was the shore staff communicating with each other, thought that was actually the load master or whatever they're called, saying you could drive, and off he drove and probably hit somebody because of that confusion and that interface. And like all things, whenever you get these interface issues, I can imagine that must be a challenge to overcome as well in terms of making sure that everybody knows who's in charge of what evolution. And as you say, row packs, unusually high density of people, lots of components of what could be otherwise quite a nasty situation if not handled correctly. So the fact that you don't get that many incidents, worldwide, you must be doing something right.
Well, yeah, and it's evolving the whole time. There are different ways now of teaching vehicle deck safety, and training is a key, obviously, and self-awareness. One of the things that caused a lot of incidents was the use of personal mobile phones by staff on the vehicle decks. Something that many, particularly the younger generation, dare I say, are more apt to do. And a lot of ro-ro companies now have banned their staff from having personal mobile phones in their possession while they're working on vehicle decks, because they have been cause of fatalities where people are focused on what they're doing with the phone and not actually paying attention to their situational awareness, which is really important on a vehicle deck. With the ro-ro ferries, they're not just carrying freight, they often carry lorry drivers as well. So they are passenger ships. In fact, if they carry more than 12 passengers, they're definitely classed as a passenger vessel. And in some of those vessels, the only access to the ship is via the loading ramp.
Yeah, the human factor thing then. So 80% of accidents, incidents have a human element to it. Is that going up or going down?
Meant to be staying about the same, actually. Yeah, mid-80s, 84, 85% of incidents all have a human factor. Which, of course, actually, we could, if you fancy, dive down the route looking ahead about autonomy and the effect of that on the row-packs industry. You got any thoughts about that, Andrew?
I've thought about it, but I knew it was coming after my it was over. So, I think it's something. Yeah, it's obviously in the future. There's no doubt about it, and we could say that autonomy would remove the human factor element of incidents, but will it really? Because the autonomous vessels have to be programmed by humans. So, at the end of the day, and technology, as we all know, isn't infallible. But as Adam rightly says, it's something that has been pretty consistent over the years. And the thing that tells me is that our current method of training seafarers in many ways is not working as it should. And then we have to sort of ask ourselves, well, STCW, is it actually having the effect on safety that we would like it to have?
That's interesting. Yeah, keep going with that train of thought.
Yeah, where to start really. STCW is designed so that we have a high level of professionalism in the industry and that it is standardized across the globe. Now, there are many problems with that. As far as I'm aware from my personal experience, I have had crew members in the past join the vessel with a nice shiny new advanced firefighting certificate, STCW approved training center, and they can't even correctly put on a breathing apparatus. So something somewhere isn't correct. So first of all, the first thing I would say is monitoring the standards of training in these training colleges around the world needs to be policed better to make sure they are actually educating their seafarers to the correct standard. I would also say that, particularly with bridge operations, which is my specialist area, I'd like to see to come into STCW more onboard assessments of how people actually are taking the training they're doing in these training establishments and then how they're applying that training in the actual everyday operational environment on the bridge of the ship. Because in my experience, and I'm guilty of it myself, is that you go on a training course, all enthusiastic, you go and do simulations on the fixed simulators, maybe once every 5 years, and you come away with, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a great idea. But then integrating that into your everyday operations so that you reach that standard is more complex because it involves more people. It has to come from the top. It has to come from the master. The master has to say, this is the way we're going to operate our bridge. And there is no sort of argument about that. These are the standards we require. It's not actually happening in a lot of cases, I don't think. And that is where incidents happen. And if you look at the human factor, most of the human factor elements that I have seen in incidents are addressed in bridge resource training management. So the problem is not the training, it's how that training is applied in everyday operations on the ship. Now, I think the airline industry are well ahead of us with this because they do have more assessment of pilots and cockpit crews than we do in maritime. And I think assessments of competency of the bridge operations should be a part of the STCW requirements so that, every now and again, a bridge team is subject to an assessment from an assessor. We need to look at the way people are operating the bridges of the ships and how they're interacting with the pilot is another area where you find a lot of incidents happen where the pilot isn't being properly integrated into the bridge team. So that is one big area where we could improve, I think.
Do you feel like there's quite a bit of negative feeling towards somebody coming and looking at what the team is doing, the bridge team, that would be seen as interference? So that wouldn't be
Yeah.
Currently, with the current culture, it might not be popular, perhaps.
I think it's the same with any audit or inspection, and being master at sea for 20 years plus, I was the subject of thousands of audits and inspections, particularly on passenger vessels. I won't say you look forward to them because that's perhaps not true, but it is just part of the job. You do realize that you're going to be inspected, you're going to be checked. For bridge operations, for some reason, we don't do that. We do it with ISM, we do it with port state inspections, but really bridge operations are not. I think it's such an important topic that it should be taken out as a separate topic, and we should have proper assessments of bridge operations, navigation assessments, BRM assessments, and that way people will maintain the level of professionalism and excellence that we all want.
It's quite interesting in your work that you work with a lot of new technology that supports training and assessments. The technology is there now to actually monitor pretty much everything that happens on a bridge from the shore, isn't it? If you wanted to.
Modern ships, obviously, they have capability for shore management to monitor the engines and the speed you're doing, your position, but not the actual navigation of the vessel. So how you're applying the collision regulations, how you're working as a BRM team, that is all recorded on the VDR, of course, and the VDR is another way of doing assessments, and that is a very controversial subject.
That's voice data recording, isn't it, Andrew? Just for my landlubbers.
Yeah, that voyage data recording, it not only records the voices of everybody on the bridge, it records the radar picture, ECDIS. It's so you can actually rebuild the voyage and you can see exactly what happened. To me, it's a really good way of doing an assessment because it's done when you're not physically present. So what happens with a physical audit in general, and I think it's hard to get around it, people do behave differently when there's an auditor on the bridge than they would perhaps when there isn't. So the benefit of a BDR audit is that you're not there. People will just act as they normally do. And it's quite interesting to be the fly on the wall. But of course, that is controversial because people feel it's an intrusion on their privacy. They like to know when they're being inspected. And I think, fair points on both sides. So I don't think that they may ever become the norm.
I mean, it is used after an accident, isn't it? All of that information and recordings are given as evidence, which is the experience I've had.
Yes.
Understanding the level of detail that can be reconstructed after an accident. But obviously, it's interesting, isn't it, thinking about how that actually could be used to prevent an accident.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to think that they're at work all day long and they're completely being watched and monitored. I can see how that would be disconcerting for most people.
Yeah, I can remember when VDRs first came on the ships. It's quite a long time ago now, but there was a real worry about it, that is this right, that we're being watched, but you soon become used to it and forget it's there, to be honest. And it is only, if there's an incident or an accident, then its VDR tape will be pulled and then it will be used. As you say, surely we should think, is there a possibility here that this is a piece of equipment that we're not using to its full potential and it could be used to actually prevent accidents and incidents rather than in the aftermath of one? It's just a good topic for discussion, maybe. Within the industry.
Yes.
No, that's a really good point you've raised there, and potentially, I guess, to some people, controversial, although I fully agree with what you're saying. Certainly, proactive use of data to stop accidents or to actually head them off or minimize them. I mean, that's the general direction of things. And as you say, VDR, one method. Certainly, in terms of things like how a team is operating together or whether there's any friction in the team and actually there's an awful lot of, there are other tools out there now. Now, I'm not advocating the use of being monitored by AI from a VDR, but certainly there are ways of listening in bulk and being able to detect people's emotional state and things from a tone of voice, because of course VDR you lose the nuance of actually being able to see them most of the time. And of course there's all the non-verbals that don't get recorded. Of course, I would say this, wouldn't I, given that we run a data-driven reporting service, But actually the use of data and the use of benchmarking is an incredibly useful tool when it comes to incident prevention and training and assessment. And as you say, sort of ongoing assessment of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can, we could talk about alarms on bridges. There's another topic. I've been on vessels where you see tape being taped over alarms because they're annoying. And yeah, it becomes, I think the two areas, I suppose, that are a danger to us are complacency, and particularly in my sector, the ferry industry, where you are operating literally in and out of the same ports on a daily basis with the same crew. Yeah, complacency is a big enemy. Secondly, skill fade, which we talked a little bit about earlier, whereby, you go on a training course and you're at a high level of training and excellence, and over a period of time that fades and you go back into old habits. I mean, we all do that. I'm sure if any of us took our driving tests now, we'd probably fail on numerous points. So
yes, I can attest to that. My daughter just recently passed and she told me a lot of things that I really didn't know.
Yeah, and it's the same, in maritime. What we need to do is we need to be able to level out that high level of skill which people reach once they have training. And then we need to be able to maintain that. And if we can achieve that, I think the level of human factor incidents would drop dramatically. That's my personal view.
I hope so.
Whether we will ever reach there, I don't know.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've actually been using some of this technology in the training environment. You've taken it all over the world, haven't you? Do you want to tell us a bit about what you've been doing recently?
Yeah, when I came ashore during the pandemic and trying to find a new direction in my life, what I tried to do was I wanted to give something back to the industry that had given me so much. My passion was maritime safety. And while we were all locked up in our houses during COVID, I met Andy Parkin. He was from a Royal Navy background, actually. He'd got together with a developer who developed virtual reality training solutions. And I joined the team as their maritime standards lead to make sure that the training solutions they were building were of the standard required. Over those last few years, we have developed a standalone virtual reality bridge simulator, which is MetaQuest virtual reality headsets, which are very affordable. They are standalone, so they're not tethered to any computer. So all you need to join our virtual bridge is a MetaQuest headset and a Wi-Fi connection. And you can be anywhere in the world, and you can join a training session on our bridge we call Vasco. And it's been absolutely astonishing to me. The first time I sort of set foot in this virtually into the bridge, I was completely in awe of it, because the thing about it is with fixed simulators, basically they are TV screens around you. And yeah, they're brilliant. Benefit of virtual reality is that you can get the parallax. So if there's a window frame on the bridge, you can look around it, which you can't do in a fixed simulator. Obviously, the cost of the hardware is very affordable, but the benefit of being able to be anywhere in the world opens up a whole new level of options for the maritime industry to do training. Ship companies could have their own simulators in-house. We can operate the simulator as a cloud-based solution, or it can be operated through a local area network. So with the cloud-based solution, we've been doing some training with various clients all over the world, and recently started our Vasco supported program, which came about as a result of questions from the industry, actually, that they liked the technology, but they needed also people to deliver the training. So we are now doing both. So we're not only providing the hardware and software, we're also delivering the training with master mariner instructors.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Well, I mean, we all know about the awful situation in Ukraine with the war there, but you actually were contacted by some of the new sort of seafarers, weren't you, from that part of the world who were really struggling with their training abilities?
Yes, it came about because of UK government actually wanting to provide support to the maritime sector in Ukraine. And they were looking for options on how the UK could fund training for Ukrainian seafarers who were struggling, as you say, in the situation they're in. they contracted us to deliver training via our VR simulator to University of Odessa, Maritime University. The idea being that we would do 12-week delivery of training, and then they would adopt that product themselves in their university to do their own training. So the 12 weeks was really interesting because it was a real test for us with the difficulties that they were having in Ukraine. And I have to say, we were absolutely astonished by the results. Started off, we used the same team of students, as it were, for the whole training period, and they really embraced it. And we were able to deliver bridge resource management training over 12 different scenarios, increasing in complexity. They completed every one. We did have a few issues with difficulties in Ukraine with power outages, air raid sirens being activated during the training and things like that. But it proves that, they didn't need to have the fixed simulator to continue training. And so it's a great asset to them. And it also proved the technology for us. So yeah, it was a great success.
It sounds like a really impressive project.
That's actually hugely exciting because not only are you been able to deliver scenarios that people wouldn't necessarily come across, perhaps even on vessel types or locations they've never been to before. I guess actually headsets, you'll talk about can track eye movements, but I do know that there have been academic trials where they've put people in situations, in bridge environments, put them in a position where, or they basically used a previous incident and got people to recreate it to see whether or not they would then make the same mistakes. And then they were able to track eye movements and see what the point at which people became distracted or overwhelmed or that they got confused, and able to then use that again, so almost push them into a point of failure safely, and then use that to actually as a learning mechanism, which is just amazing.
Yes, we're currently actually examining the use of eye tracking in our products and also the use of artificial intelligence so that, for example, we're hoping that we'll be able to give our vessels, target vessels in the scenarios, their own intelligence so that, for example, they follow the collision regulations without us having to program them to do it. So, a target vessel in a crossing situation, even though we're not controlling it, will know that it must alter course to starboard at a certain point. And I was working on that this morning, actually, before I came on to this interview, trying to figure out how we're going to give the instructions to the programmers on how to put this artificial intelligence or put my brain into the ship so that it knows what to do in different situations. So it actually isn't until you try to write it down that you realize exactly how complex navigating a ship is when you're trying to break it down into simple decision-making processes and then the consequences of those decisions. So, for example, yes, you can alter course to starboard and you're going to clear that ship nicely, but what effect is that going to have on the other vessels in the area? So, it becomes very complex, and it's very exciting actually that, the technology is now enabling us to do these things.
Yeah, and it's great that you're just evolving, your services and the ideas that you have, you're evolving it as the technology continues to evolve and finding new uses for it, which is really interesting, I think.
It's absolutely astonished me how far we've gone and how far we're going with it.
We're going to have to come back to you, aren't we, and find out there might be a ton more things that you're doing this time next year, Andrew.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's virtual reality training, I think, is the future, big part of the future for maritime training. Things like marine evacuation systems, virtual reality solutions for that, where people can actually deploy a marine evacuation system, something that is very difficult to be able to do in real life because of the cost of reading these things. So, all these things, it's opened up a whole new world for maritime training.
So, Andrew, this is really interesting stuff. Why don't we explore the route to accreditation for virtual training solutions such as the ones you've been talking about?
Yeah, that's the difficulty that we are having in a way. We are delivering bridge resource management training to several clients via our virtual reality solution, but it's not accredited. So it's not an accredited STCW bridge resource management course, and it's not approved by any accreditation authority. And this is a bit of a difficulty because there is no allowance in the standards for simulation that our system can reach. I think what we really hope for is that the authorities will catch up with the technology and allow us to deliver this training as an accredited course, because the results we're getting from it, there is no doubt in my mind, and having been in a master of a ship for 20 years, there is no doubt in my mind that this training is every bit as good as the training you get on a fixed simulator. And there is no reason why it should not be accredited as such.
That's interesting. Well, I tell you what, this isn't normally an interactive podcast, but I'm going to throw this out to any listeners out there who perhaps work either in accreditation or for regulators. Why don't you write to us at mail@chirp.co.uk and let us know why these systems haven't been accredited. What is the counter argument? I'd love to hear that, because actually, as you've just mentioned, this every bit as good, in many ways better than fixed training simulators. I'm sure you could probably make people feel queasy in the same way as I remember sitting in a landside simulator and feeling sick because it was moving and I wasn't. And it was like reverse seasickness. Rather than me moving and not the environment was moving and I wasn't. And I just couldn't work that out.
Actually, it's a very interesting point you raised there, because a lot of the problems with virtual reality solutions is nausea. We have got around that by not allowing free movement on the bridge. You can't walk around the bridge, but what you can do is you can teleport between positions on the bridge, and that takes away the effect of the nausea. And so far, I don't think we've had a single person complain of nausea, even though they're doing 40, 45-minute scenarios in the virtual world. So it seems to work by doing it in that way.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Brilliant.
You've covered some really interesting topics for us, especially on the technology that's available. One final question. If you could change anything, what would you change for safety?
My priority would definitely be to review the STCW code and to ensure that the training provided under STCW is effectively incorporated into everyday operations on the ships, because I think that is where it falls down. So yeah, I think some sort of amendment to STCW that requires continual assessment and continual improvement.
Good one.
Excellent. Excellent.
Really enjoyed having you with us, Andrew, and we'll be ringing the bell now and we're going to leave the bridge virtually. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate that, Andrew.
You're very welcome. Thank you for all you're doing. And Chirp as well. I'm proud Chirp ambassador myself. So yeah, it's great to see people working towards a safer maritime for everybody.
I'm very grateful that having the Coast Guard here. Would you like to act clearly? Do I? If that happened.